Residency and citizenship considerations you don't want to ignore. Today I'm going to share an abundance of personal experience that has helped me personally make appropriate decisions related to residency applications, company formation, and other very important factors such as military service, tax liabilities, and many more things that you absolutely want to know before you become a resident or citizen of a country. Let's start out talking about the residency requirements and how certain countries do not process citizenship applications for foreigners. There are a ton of countries where that is the case. If you want to become a resident of a country and later on get to citizenship, you want to carefully examine the citizenship requirements, the chances of you getting approved, and whether you qualify for citizenship. Let me give you an example. Citizens of Israel cannot even immigrate to many Middle Eastern countries. They're banned. They can't even get in because these countries don't have good relations. Anyway, this is an extreme example, right? So unless you are like from Israel, North Korea, or another country that is just not in a good situation, relations-wise, it's going to be hard, right? If you're from one of the two countries and a few more. Iran is another example. But if you're from a Western country and you want to immigrate to Asia, and you go there with the illusion that you will become a citizen, guess what? You are going to be waiting for a long time. I've just recently been informed about several stories of people who commented on our channel, emails that were sent, and also experiences of personal friends of mine where they did not even progress to permanent residency because the path was not clear to begin with, and maybe the government changes things, and as a rule of thumb, residency has become more difficult to obtain in Asia. Look at Singapore. They don't want any more foreign permanent residents. Before, like 15-20 years ago, they were more open. The requirements were more flexible, lower income requirements. But today, if you want to become a permanent resident of Singapore, you have to meet very high income and net worth requirements. The stakes have gone up. And let's not even talk about naturalizing in Singapore, an almost impossible feat to accomplish. Of course, Singapore is just one example. If we have a look at Malaysia, we can see that during the past administration, the requirements for residency, specifically for the Malaysia My Second Home program, had quadrupled. So they had announced that all of a sudden you had to meet quadrupled income requirements, and these requirements were actually forced on people that were already on residency. Later on, they came back and said current pass holders don't have to meet the new requirements. So they kind of, revised their publicly announced mistake or mistakes. However, once the trust is gone, the trust is usually gone for good, because you see that if they're able to do this now, let's say they don't honor what they agreed on prior to you signing up, that is usually a big red flag that you want to avoid at all costs. Several people commented on our channel about having spent over 10 years and 12 years and 13 years in Malaysia before they were granted permanent residency. Imagine what kind of a time commitment you're looking at. And in the event that immigration policies should tighten, which we're seeing across the board in Asia, you may be waiting for a long time or possibly forever. If you get there in your 40s or 50s and you have to wait 10 or 20 years, that's not fun. Of course, there are exceptions like the Philippines with the SRRV program, which is a great revenue generator for the Philippines, where you can buy in. Technically you just deposit $10,000, you prove a pension, and you're being granted permanent residency pretty easily. Or let's say you have no income in the Philippines and you can deposit $20,000, then you can also obtain permanent residency in the Philippines, which is permanent. There are some annual fees to pay, but at least you feel more certain than in a place like Malaysia, where the authorities had shown flip-flop policies through and through in the past years. That kind of situation makes you uneasy and uncertain about your future in Malaysia. Vietnam is another example where it's very hard to get permanent residency. I haven't seen a single person that was able to obtain permanent residency in Vietnam. In fact, very recently a friend of mine decided to discontinue with his temporary residency, and after having spoken to several people who live in Vietnam who are actually married to Vietnamese citizens, I surprisingly figured out that none of them was on permanent residency. Not one person. They're not allowed to get permanent residency. Maybe someone of a very special and needed talent would would get it. Maybe some high-level investor, high net worth individual could get it, but the average Joe like you and me, we have practically zero chance for obtaining Vietnamese permanent residency. So there is the permanent residency and citizenship consideration. Another thing that's very important is that certain countries you move to, and let's say in Spain you get the Beckham Law deal, that is technically not an immigrant visa because you're not immigrating to Spain. It is not a residence permit. So if you come to Spain with the mindset, I'm not going to pay taxes because I take advantage of the Beckham Law option, which initially was introduced when David Beckham, the Brit, moved to Spain to play for the football team Real Madrid. And that's how this visa came about, this regime, came about. However, it is not a permanent residence permit, and there's also no path to permanent residency on this specific option. Of course, you can get other visas, residence permits for Spain, and that would work, but it is not a residence permit. The good thing about the Beckham Law is that you're not going to pay taxes on foreign sourced income as a non-resident of Spain, so only your locally sourced income would be taxed in Spain. So there are pros and cons here, just like there are in Asia. You're looking at pros and cons everywhere. And just to continue with Spain, because there's always a big misconception that Spain allows dual citizenship. Yes and no. Spain allows dual citizenship under certain conditions for certain nationals only. It is not a widely accepted policy that Spain has in place. Let me give an example. If you were born in a Latin country and you can prove that you were born in that country, you have citizenship and you have your birth certificate, you can immigrate to Spain and apply for citizenship in as little as 2 years. It could take longer depending on whether you break your residency or not. But in order for you to do that, if you come from a Latin country into Spain, you actually have to obtain residency, so the Beckham Law would not cut it because it is not a residence permit. So you have to come to Spain with the intention to have a real residency, meaning you will be taxed on your worldwide income. There are no exceptions. And the European Union countries, they take this seriously and religiously. Possibly not as strict as the United States of America, but still very, very strict about residency requirements and tax monitoring. They are not so easy about that. So don't come to Spain with the intention of, oh, I'm not going to pay taxes and I'm going to get a passport, because you're going to be running into a wall and it's not going to be delightful. It's going to be painful. So if you're a citizen from a Latin country that has a treaty with Spain where you can obtain citizenship in maybe 2 to 3 years, that would be an option. And you can also keep your original passport because, hundreds of years ago, Spain colonized a lot of these countries. And so obviously there are certain principles in place that still apply today. However, if you are from a country like Austria and you want to get citizenship in Spain, then the same rule would not apply to an Austrian citizen or to a French citizen or to a Polish citizen. It would not apply to these people, even though geographically speaking they are much closer to Spain than Latin America, but given the policies that are in place, it would not apply to them. Likewise, if you are from the US, you can't have dual citizenship with Spain. Of course, there are exceptions. You can get it at birth if, let's say, your father is from Spain, your mother is from America, and you get the passport upon birth, then that's fine, right? If you get citizenship at birth, then that's fine. But if you want to immigrate to Spain and you want to naturalize, it's going to take many years unless you get married. There'd be a shortcut. You're just looking at a few years. Then it will be harder, right? If you're from the Philippines, there's also a special option available where you can get citizenship in Spain. However, you may not be able to keep a different citizenship. For instance, I had just recently spoken to a person who had dual citizenship with America and the Philippines, and so he may be able to keep his Filipino citizenship but maybe not his American citizenship, because Spain and the US, for citizenship, they just don't have something solid in place that would allow citizens of both countries to retain the current citizenship when they apply at the other country. It's very tricky. Then there are countries that don't allow dual citizenship at all. And now we talk about the citizenship side of things. If we take a look at a country like Austria, right? My native country where I was born, I have an Austrian passport, which is a bit of a dilemma. If I want to get dual citizenship in another country, it's going to be hard unless I can get an exception, because technically Austria does not allow dual citizenship unless you get it at birth. For instance, instance, people in my family who married, for instance, an American. I have one example. He was born in Austria, also the area where I'm from, and he moved to America. He married an American woman, and the baby was born by parents of two different nationalities. So his child, which is, I guess, my niece's second degree or so, she has dual citizenship with America and Austria. But he, since he was born in Austria, he's my great uncle, he could not get dual citizenship unless he would get the exception, which is hard. The one person, or one of the few people who have obtained dual citizenship, who were born in Austria, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. He got citizenship in America, but it was for political reasons that the Austrian government allowed him to also accept the citizenship in the US and still retain his Austrian citizenship, right? That's a very rare exception that Austria made in Arnold's case. Germany just recently made it easier. Why? They've been getting a lot of immigrants, so they made it easier to get dual citizenship. Other countries like Holland also don't make it easy. In many cases, they can't get dual citizenship. And if we take a look at Eastern European countries, many of them don't allow dual citizenship so easily. So it's a very tricky situation. The question is, do I want to retain my current passport, or do I want to renounce my citizenship to get maybe a tier 2 passport, which is usually not advisable. Let's say you want to surrender your EU citizenship, you want to renounce EU citizenship to get Latin citizenship. Oftentimes people wouldn't even consider that because an EU passport is just a lot stronger. In terms of travel freedom, in terms of freedom of movement, there's nothing that's even close to as powerful as an EU passport. You can't tell me that a Singapore passport or an UAE passport is better. An UAE passport is not better because, yeah, you can visit more countries visa-free, but you can't enjoy freedom of movement. So for the freedom of movement principle, you can't beat the European Union. There's nothing like it. Let's talk about compulsory military service, a very unspoken topic that should raise an eyebrow or two, especially if you consider obtaining citizenship in a country where compulsory military service is in place. And there are many countries where you're looking at this fact. Let me give you an example. My native country, every person that's above 18 has to do the compulsory military service. In Austria, if you don't want to do the compulsory military service, there is an alternative called Zivildienst. If you want to do Zivildienst, then you can do that. But you have to choose. If you're male, you have to choose. It's either compulsory military service or Zivildienst. And there's no way to escape unless you have a medical condition that is prolonged. Obviously, you have to get the letter from your doctor. And let's say you have a medical condition at 18 and it gets better at 19, then they will call you in to do it at 19. If the medical condition should carry on for many years, then you may be exempt from compulsory military service in Austria. This is an extreme example. It does happen, right? But if that happens, let's say you have a back problem, then they may also not take you. If they see that, you have some kind of serious medical condition, then you will be exempt from compulsory military service. Let's take this further. Let's say you get citizenship in a country like Armenia, Georgia, or any country where the citizens of that country, if you are located in the country at the time that a war should break out, you have to join the military. And there's no way to get out of the country, and you are a citizen of that country, and they will know. If you have gained the passport officially, then they will know. And so I feel like some people are now escaping that region because they feel like there is a bit of a chance that the war could break out. We hope not, but there's certain people even in our industry that have gotten citizenship in that specific region that are now spending less time there. And maybe that's one of the reasons behind their decisions, right? So citizenship during war is a very serious consideration. Even if the compulsory military service does not apply to you, but let's say you want to immigrate with your family and you have sons that are under the age of 18, then they would have to do the compulsory military service, assuming that they have obtained citizenship in the country. So the decision you have to make is not just about yourself, it's also about your family. Of course, if you're alone, then things are much easier. But if you're married with kids, this is a very serious consideration. Residency during war is another very important point. If war should break out, and we hope not, but if it should break out, let's say you're somewhere in the East and you have a Western passport, okay? And very likely those Eastern countries will be siding with the mainland. That's more likely to happen than option 2. what's going to happen to you? Will they round you up and take you as prisoners? Think about it. I mean, this is a very serious consideration. And don't tell me, oh, we're in the 21st century. This will not happen because we have learned from our mistakes, or the cost of getting involved in war are just too high and governments wouldn't do that. You really think that human genetics change from one century to the next? Like, war has been around forever, right? It's been around for thousands of years. And you think that now, just because we're in a very super technologically advanced time, we're not going to get involved in a war? That's not true. And there will be war again. The only question is when, not if. And just because we're living in the 21st century and we're exempt because, we have learned so much from past history, don't you think that our ancestors claimed the same? They claimed this for hundreds of years, right? So there's no guarantee in life for anything. I want you to place your bets intelligently and strategically, so that in the event of the worst case scenario, you have secured yourself in the right place where you will be aligned with the country. And it's very possible that many countries will have to choose a side. This is not just about the East. Even in the Western Hemisphere, countries will choose a side. If it comes down to it, they will have to. Maybe for some countries, it will not come down to choosing a side because of geographic isolation reasons. But then there will be countries that will be forced into choosing a side. And if you cannot get citizenship in that country, and if you are there with your original passport and you have no residency, you're just a long-term visitor, like it is in many countries, you may have some problems. You have to plan for the worst case scenario and accept the consequences as they start to roll in. And the most unlikely scenario will likely not happen in the short term, but in the long term, it becomes increasingly more likely that the worst case scenario, or one of the worst case scenarios, could play out. And mental preparation is really your ultimate deciding factor for how you will position yourself and also how you will deal with it if it happens. If you're interested in obtaining residency in one of the countries that we back, then please contact us. You should see our website displayed right on the screen. There should also be a link below this video. Thank you for watching Nomad Elite. We truly appreciate you, and we see you on the next video.